With that, I would like to hand over the floor to the chair.
Thank you so much, Sumnima. Thanks to NICE for organizing this very important session today with a distinguished panel of esteemed scholars. Today's session will quickly begin. It's titled Nepal-Japan Partnership. And we have with us three eminent scholars in the field. As we know, Nepal and Japan have shared very warm relations, and this year, 2021, marks 65 years of diplomatic relations between Japan and Nepal. So it's a very important topic, given the increased importance of Japan within the region of Indo-Pacific and beyond, and Nepal as an important country within the Himalayan network as well as in South Asia. So to give his comments and make a presentation, I would like to first invite Dr. Madan Kumar Bhataraj, who's a former foreign secretary and former Nepalese ambassador to Japan. Sir, I invite you for your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, madam. First of all, I greet you, madam, because I have full faith, full astha on you, madam, because actually on your youthful and erudite leadership, stewardship of this seminar. I'm not a scholar, academic, or expert in the real sense of the term. I'm just a student and a bureaucrat. Anyway, let me start my presentation. I will just try to be as brief as possible, madam. Good morning, namaskar, and konnichiwa. Thank you, friends from NICE Nepal, for once again inviting this humble self to share feelings on Nepal-Japan relations after giving me an opportunity to talk on the journey of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Nepal in the historical perspective only yesterday. Let me first of all extend our greetings to all friends who are listening to or viewing this program from Nepal and abroad. Before I come to my designated topic, let me share three things that we have strongly felt all these years, especially in the last few years. First, we Nepali boast of our own achievements in various fields and even wish that others should learn and take lessons from us in practically all fields, including diplomatic. Second, we don't like to judge and fathom what others feel about us, our activities, and our overall track record. Third, we don't at all want to learn from best practices of other countries, including state-to-state relations, as we feel that we know the best. Taking these points into consideration, I have no hesitation in letting the audience that Japanese are too modest and polite with the best sense of humility and normally don't share their feelings, but there are implicit reservations on the part of Japan about our conduct, the way we carry out diplomacy, and our unnecessary penchant for travels in the name of goodwill visits, study tours, inspection journeys, and taking part in the conferences. While Japan may bear the expenses of many such tours, including those financed by JICA, they don't take these as official visits that our people wish to convert into or seek Japanese concurrence in meeting people since they land in Japan. The other problem is visits by even top dignitaries on the invitation organizations that Japan does not recognize or has serious reservations. The other aspect Japan doesn't feel comfortable is our track record in terms of implementation projects, including various procedural matters like contract, consultancy, and others, not to speak of unusual delays with cost overruns. With this reservation, let me try to briefly introduce some aspects of Nepal-Japan ties and my own study of the country for 4 years. Let me at the outset make it clear and confess that I had never been to Japan before my arrival in this beautiful country in the concluding week of November 2011 to take up my assignment. So many of my observations may have inbuilt shortcomings, as I am still a learner of the most important country that progressed on the basic premises of Emperor Meiji's stress on fusion of Japan's tradition with latest technology from the West. Nepal-Japan relations go back to centuries behind, especially in the context of the spread of Buddhism in the country from Nepal, India, China, and Korea in the 8th century. The 45th Emperor Shomu, who was born in 1701 and died in 1756, remained emperor from 1724 to 1749, took a momentous decision to abdicate and become a full-fledged Buddhist monk. This was also the period when Japan made marvelous Buddhist temples all over the country that has survived to this day to become the symbol of Nepal-Japan ties. In the modern context, Ikai Kawaguchi, a reverend Buddhist Zen monk, came to Nepal in 1899 for the first time during the travels to Tibet and visited Nepal 4 times, and even gave valuable suggestions to then Prime Minister Chandra Shamsher to introduce reforms, especially in the sector of education, so as to promote Nepal's socio-economic development. As Japan now in the Reiwa period, with the assumption of throne by His Imperial Majesty, that Japanese called Tenno Haika, Naruhito, 126th monarch in the line of the world's longest unbroken monarchy, that is going to celebrate its 2682nd anniversary on February 11, 2022. Let me now briefly touch on some landmarks of Meiji, who was the 122nd emperor, Showa, who was 124th emperor, and Heisei, who was 125th emperor, that cover reigns of 3 emperors, Meiji, Showa, who is more known as Hirohito, Emperor Hirohito, and Heisei, Emperor Akihito in the Meiji period. In the Meiji period, we sent 8 Nepali students to Japan for the first time for higher study, who on the return not only introduced some aspects of modernism in Nepal, but also brought some fruits and flowers for cultivation here. In the Showa period, when the Japanese expedition successfully ascended Mount Manaslu on May 9, 1956, King Mahendra and Prime Minister Tankaprasad Acharya received the expedition members with great acclaim in Kathmandu. Showa Tenno, the Emperor Hirohito, was on record to give the most touching message to the expedition and to the Japanese people on the success of the mountaineering team, taking it as a great morale booster for the country, following the humiliation that the country had to suffer during the Second World War. We established formal diplomatic relations soon after the maiden success in climbing Manaslu peak, and our relations flourished in the Showa period, with Japan emerging as the leading development partner of Nepal. This phase continued in the Heisei era with a number of development projects in various spheres, including food and agriculture, industry, education, health, hydropower generation, communication, transport, and other sectors of national infrastructure development. During Showa and most part of Heisei era, Nepal-Japan relations in the pre-republican order had 3 levels of ties: royal, imperial, government to government, and people to people. The last level is related to tourism and mountaineering, as many ace climbers like Junko Tabei, whom I had the honor to interview well back in 1975, when many of the audience were not even born, and Yuichiro Miura have become goodwill ambassadors of Nepal-Japan ties of friendship and cooperation. In respect of bilateral cooperation, we may take 2001-2012 period at the difficult time in the sense that despite all sorts of bilateral exchange, Japan had suspended its ODA to Nepal, primarily owing to our own domestic circumstances. Foreign Minister Koichiro Gemba made an official visit to Nepal in 2012 to take stock of the political situation in view of our constant lobbying for waiver of suspension of ODA for facilitating major projects in Nepal in view of the changed political landscape and our public eagerness to divert our attention to socio-economic transformation. Mention may also be made of the unanimous assurances given by major leaders of political parties to Gemba Sensei that the drafting of the new constitution of Nepal was virtually completed, repeat, virtually completed, and the formal act of promulgation of the new constitution law of the land is only a matter of few weeks, repeat, only a matter of few weeks. It is interesting that the words virtually completed and a matter of few weeks proved elusive, if not totally deceptive. as instead of promulgation, the first Constituent Assembly had an unnatural death within the period of few weeks. Japan had invested a lot in the sector of constitutional legal development in Nepal, including providing much needed logistic support to both elections to the Constituent Assembly. Credit goes to the government of Japan for resuming ODA as of 2013, despite our failed promises to deliver on the matters of new constitution. It may not be out of place to once again go back to the days preceding actual promulgation of the Constitution in Nepal on September 20, 2015. The embassy in Nepal in Japan received an urgent message to take up with the Japanese side to welcome forthcoming promulgation of the Constitution, which has a difficult task in view of conflicting reports on the promulgation of Atom and our earlier failures to keep up the promises made by the top political leadership. It is to the great credit to Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida, who took over as 100th and 101st Prime Minister of the country in recent months, that Japan became the only country in the world to welcome 2 days in advance our impending promulgation of the new constitution. The statement of Kishida Sensei was explicit in 2 more respects: Japan's continued commitment to Nepal's overall development, social and economic progress, and unity of the country, and its reaffirmation of earlier pledge to contribute to Nepal's post-disaster reconstruction in the wake of Mekah earthquake that hit the country on April 25th, 2015. It may not be out of place to also note that we were able to collect a record amount of private contributions from Japan to Prime Minister Disaster Relief Fund that time. Taking into account Japan's continued support and goodwill for Nepal in the context of constitutional development, it may not be out of place to mention that Japan was also the first country to formally receive the English text of the Constitution of Nepal 1990 from our side, when accompanying minister to Crown Prince Dipendra were left Kathmandu for Japan on the very day of the formal promulgation of the Constitution on November 9, 1990, to attend the formal enthronement ceremony of Emperor Heisei. Achutraj Regmi had formally handed over the text of the Constitution, once held as the best documents of its type, to Foreign Minister of Japan, Dr. Taro Nakoyama, on November 13. Talking of the resumed ODA, Japan has undertaken major projects like Tanu Hydroelectric Scheme, Tribhuvan International Airport, radar renovation and installation project, and Nagdunga Khanikhola tunnel project. It needs no emphasis that the tunnel project was delayed simply on account of plethora of inspection cum relaxing trips that our senior officials and ministers undertook for quite a long time, along with their families, for fun and pleasure. Another agreement that may be mentioned in respect of bilateral relations of recent period is the signing of sisterly agreement between Lumbini and Koyasan, both registered with the UNESCO as heritage sites that has special importance in terms of promoting bilateral tourism, despite the decision of Japan Buddhist Federation withdrawing its association from the Lumbini Development Trust. This has added the list of such sisterly agreements to 4, with Kathmandu, Pokhara, and Tukuche already in the list. While Emperor Akihito and Empress Michiko visited Nepal in 1960 and 1975, when they were crown prince and crown princess, their much awaited state visit planned for 2013 could not materialize on account of our perceived concentration for holding second Constituent Assembly elections. His Majesty Naruhito, who is an authority in water conservation and environment, has visited Nepal in 1987. To conclude, there is every opportunity for further consolidating Nepal-Japan ties and diversify them in various sectors. If we could be serious in really understanding the aspirations of the people of the 2 countries and untapped reservoirs of goodwill and respect that the people of Japan have for Nepal and Nepali people. One example of such goodwill was the late Prime Minister Ryotaro Hashimoto, who visited Nepal as many as 33 times during his short life. Our tribute to the great friend of Japan. There is absolutely no doubt that with the assumption of the authority of Prime Minister by Fumio Kishida Sensei, things look brighter, but let me stress that the onus of responsibility on consolidation of bilateral relations is squarely on our side. With these preliminary remarks on Nepal-Japan relations, as they encompass a wide range of ties, we wish our bilateral relations at a new chapter in our friendship and cooperation. Thank you very much, Madam, and all the audience for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable comments coming straight from the ground with your esteemed and valuable experience as the former ambassador to Japan. It was very enlightening. And with equal vigor, and I would like to invite Professor K.C. Khadga. He is esteemed faculty at the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy from Tribhuvan University. Sir, I'd like to invite you for your comments.
So I had 2 classes, almost kind of like exhausted, and readjust the instrument at the department, and that instrument didn't work for a while, so that I got a little late. However, it was lucky enough to enlighten by Ambassador Bhattarai, and I don't have anything to say. He has covered a lesson, and being a Japan graduate, so we love to speak Japanese, but probably no one can understand Japanese here, so that I should speak my maybe third, like, language kind of English. Well, Ambassador Bhattarai has been a career diplomat and ambassador in Japan. He has touched upon every dynamics of Nepal-Japan relations. So being a academic, and also I had almost 7.5 years from master's to PhD postdoc. I spent 7.5 years in Japan, and I studied Japanese foreign policy, Japan Asia Pacific policy. So somehow, well, I don't have any like burgeoning ideas, but just I can make things with a theoretical lens. So what is the departure point of our relations with Japan? Being the oldest nation state of South Asia, why I'm trying to say oldest nation state, Nepal, rest of all the South Asia was colonial past, except Bhutan, and we were the oldest nation state in South Asia. So we had opportunity to have diplomatic relation with British some 200 years ago. The first Asian country to be having a diplomatic, South Asian or even from Asia, including Thailand and Japan, Nepal could have diplomatic relation with United Kingdom in 1816. So probably this is a one kind of like distinct characteristics we did have in South Asia amid the cold sphere of influence. Probably East Asian civilization was led by Japan, and Japanese scholars and Meiji scholars, many of them, they didn't like accept that we are the extension of Chinese civilization. We have a distinct East Asian civilization which is somehow exchanged with the Western. You can see famous Japanese former samurai scholars who established the Keio University in early 19th century. He wrote several books, and what he argued that Japan is not an extension of Chinese civilization. This is a kind of like distinct arrogance of Japanese modern scholars. So in their perspective, why it has a distinct for Japan. That was kind of like Japanese assessment. As Ambassador Bhattarai also already shared with you with all that famous Japanese he visited Nepal 1895 around to study Buddhism. He's like arrival in the north is one of making beginning of cultural relation between Nepal. So he studied, he came all the way from Sri Lanka and India, but originally he wanted to go to Tibet, in fact. And to reach Tibet, probably Japanese had a tough time, so that he could not directly go to Tibet and stay in Nepal for a while and then try to go to Tibet. So his study is the departure point of Nepal-Japan relations. Because during those days, we had an autocratic oligarch Rana regime. We had a monarchy, however, executive power was controlled by the Ranas, aristocratic like Australian caste group in Nepal until 1950, from 1846. So then Rana Prime Minister Dev Shamsher and Chandra Shamsher, between them Dev Shamsher initially and after Chandra Shamsher, the Japanese monk, he advised several things for then Nepali ruler Dev Shamsher, followed by Chandra Shamsher. Especially, Nepal was a pioneer for Lotus policy. As Ambassador Bhatta also already noted that in 1903, Nepal sent 8 Nepali students to study in Japan under government sponsorship, unlike Japanese government fellowship. Nepal government, then government sponsor for studying higher education in Japan. So that was kind of like distinct like beginning of Nepal, because Japan and Nepal have almost similar Buddhist values, culture. Unlike sending to Western world, sending students to Japan was more comfortable for them ruler. Even if it's very interesting that for 8 students, so-called high caste students, they did take 16 servants for cooking and washing for themselves, because it was known that probably untouchability was so high, so that probably they were not allowed to have food, any food prepared by Japanese. So that was the beginning of Nepal-Japan relations, especially cultural relations in 1903 onward. And then after, politically, we established diplomatic relations only in 1956. And initially it was looked after from Delhi Embassy of Japan to Nepal. And then after the 60s, embassies were established both in Kathmandu and Tokyo. And after diplomatic relations was established, political relations was established, visit diplomacy was really much crucial because of monarchy, in both of our country. The relationship between the monarchs of both countries made bilateral relations more strengthened, and coincidentally our former king Birendra, after he graduated from Harvard University, he went to Tokyo University for a year, and his schooling in Tokyo University, I met so many Japanese when I was studying in Japan. I met so many Japanese old people who has met King Prince Birendra during his Tokyo University studentship, and there was a soft power like a royal regime of both country, and exchanges of visit diplomacy, conference diplomacy, and similar characteristics of the political regime of both countries. Japan, of course, they have already a parliamentary democracy after 1947 constitution. King was a ceremonial head of the state, but Nepal has during those days Nepal had a direct monarchy or absolute monarchy. But even if having absolute monarchy and parliamentary democracy, royal relations was very much like crucial to frame bilateral relations and to proceed to prosper, to advance our relationship with Japan and Nepal was promoted. Probably because of that royal regime in Japan, King Birendra was sent to study Japan, how Japan could develop. So King Mahendra Sen is crown prince to study further in Tokyo University. So then after, then prince and princess and former king, they visited Nepal, and King Mahendra, Queen Ratna visited Nepal of Japan, and of course several visits or exchange of visits of both royal families made relations more cemented between our two countries. And more interestingly, the current Emperor of Japan, Naruhito, what we call in Japanese new era, Reiwa era. I have recently published an article about Reiwa era and Japan relation. So he, interestingly, when he visited Nepal, and he saw a rural woman in Pokhara carrying water from a very difficult terrain. So afterward, he realized the problem of water. So that he started to speak about the water issues globally, and he became even a goodwill ambassador for water issue. So that current emperor of Japan, and His Majesty Naruhito, probably had a very good reminiscences of Nepal. So he has become a goodwill ambassador for water resources, and he has shared Emperor Naruhito shared that I was impressed with that incident when I visited Pokhara, especially Shravankoot area of tourist town of Pokhara. So that made kind of like Nepal exposure in international community through his even goodwill ambassadorship. Also afterward he went to the Oxford University for his undergrad course. So that was a political relation, diplomatic relation after 60s. Nepal-Japan relation was so much like in peak during until 1990s, when there was a monarchy, active monarchy in Nepal, and Nepal-Japan relation was kind of like different. We have to see in a different separate perspective or angle. After 1990, when Nepal went to a parliamentary democracy and constitutional monarchy, even after there were several visits between our royals of two countries, and also some of the Japanese LDP leaders like Nakasone and many others like leaders of Japan, they also took Nepal's name. And then former prime ministers of Japan, he visited several times. He also scaled Mount Everest, former prime minister, and then Prime Minister Modi visited Nepal 2002, and then Crown Prince and after monarch King Gyanendra also visited Japan. Crown Prince Dipendra also visited. So that visit diplomacy, political relation made excel or enhanced through visit diplomacy. And after 1990 also it was continued. But after 2001 onward, when there was a royal massacre in Nepal, Japanese media was so much surprised what happened, and there was a rumor that whether Maoists killed monarch in Japan. There was some newspaper reporting as well. However, it was not true. So then after the Japanese intellectual, Japanese royal or Japanese politician looked something all the way around before 2001. And it was great coincidence that I became a Japanese Government Scholarship Fellows from 2002 onward. So even after 2002, there was so much rumor that Nepal became kind of like anti-monarch or something. That Japanese perspective towards Nepal has gradually changed after 2001. And as Ambassador Bhatta also said that they, for a while, because of political instability, they stopped their foreign aid also to Nepal until Tanoa hydropower project was signed. So this was the political relation, and of course Japan has not that much political interest in Nepal. She's all with her friends for Nepal, as she doesn't have any strategic interest. However, I can say that our relationship were much like proactive, really much like visible during when there was a monarchy in Nepal. And afterwards, no matter what kind of political system Nepal adopted, we will have a relationship intact with Nepal. Several Japanese leaders and bureaucrats and diplomats has spoken about Nepal-Japan relation. And then after, when Nepal encountered Maoist insurgency, there was some all the way around perspective of Japan, Japanese scholars, Japanese state establishment towards Nepal. And after Republican setup was established in Nepal, probably they feel something like hesitate to have very much comfortable with the Nepali new rulers. But still, incessantly, Japan has become one of the largest development donors for Nepal for a long while. So, number one donor for Nepal, for Nepal's socio-economic transformation, the data already Dr. Bhattarai has already shared with you all. Academia, healthcare, infrastructure, hydropower, they have invested quite a lot with the grant assistance and reimbursement, loan, soft loan. And these are the Japanese contribution to Nepal's developmental projects. So far as our perspectives in regional and international issues are concerned, there are some issues. Nepal and Japan have a similar views and regional and international agenda. However, being a student of international relations, and what I can say that I can stress that India and Japan, they aspire to be a UN permanent Security Council member. So Nepal voted for India because of geopolitics, because of our neighborhood-like force policy. So that made somehow Japan disenchanted. That's crystal clear. Ambassador Bhattarai is a diplomat, so that probably he cannot say, but for me, it's a crystal clear. I do know hundreds of Japanese scholars because I spent 7.5 years at the Japanese university. So there was some kind of disenchantment in Japanese establishment that we have been supporting you guys for a long while as a number one donor, but when we did need your support, you did all the way around. That was a kind of inhibited. Japanese never expressed directly, they always express very indirectly. There is a famous word in Japanese, tatemae. Tatemae means you cannot say everything directly. So that Nepal should learn from Japan. One. Another one is recently there is a Indo-Pacific strategy, American, and often it was encouraged by Prime Minister Abe to Donald Trump. Both of them are populist, right-wing politicians, and so that we are already a BRI member. We have signed up in BRI, and hardly we can afford the IPS because of IPS seems like a strategic alliance. Nepal never ever can afford a strategic alliance. But we will convince Japan, our best all-weather friend, we will convince them we never ever our relations with India, our relations with China and United States never ever brings any negative repercussion to our relations with Japan. So that we have to convince Japan. However, we cannot be IPS member, Quad member, because that's a strategic alliance we cannot afford. So for that, somehow Japanese establishment is not much happy in that perspective because we are the BRI member. So these are the issues recently somehow has some differences between Nepal and Japan. Otherwise, we are all weather friends, problem-free. There is no any political vested interest of Japan in Nepal, and always having us develop ourselves, and we are getting from LDC soon, and the large contributor to make us graduated from LDC is one of our the best ever all season friend from eastern part of Asia, Japan, and we will remain as a very trustworthy friends in Himalayan region of Japan. So I think I'm done because many things I have already covered by Ambassador Bhattrai. So any questions if there will be, I will be happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we'll take the questions after the last presentation. There are some for you. All right, I would like to welcome our last presenter, Mr. Sunil Kumar Chaudhary. He's a research associate at NICE. Mr. Sunil, can we have your presentation, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to share my thoughts on Nepal-Japan relationship. I will, most of the topics has already covered by our previous speakers, but as a student of economics, I will try to focus on more on economic part. So I have made some presentation, PPT. I will share. Yeah. I will be talking about more on economic perspective, but somehow I have included some bilateral relations as well as some cultural relations topic in my presentation. So first of all, I would like to share about bilateral relations. The officially the diplomatic relation between Nepal and Japan was established on September 1st, 1956, and subsequently the Nepalese embassy was opened up in Tokyo in July 1965, and Mr. Bharat Raj Bhandari was appointed as the first ambassador to Japan. Similarly, the embassy of Japan in Kathmandu was established in February 1968, and Mr. Honorable Excellency Mr. Hidemichi Kira was appointed as the ambassador to Nepal. So since the establishment of the diplomatic relations between our two countries, Japan has been active and major partner of Nepal in development of Nepal, and it has contributed in many development activities to the Nepal. So Japan attaches a great importance to international exchange in various spheres, including people-to-people, cultural and academic contacts. So by virtue of their common Asian heritage, there is a strong cultural link between the people of Nepal and Japan. Asian values are deeply rooted in the society and people in both countries. Although Nepal and Japan are geographically distant, a spiritual bond has existed since the introduction of Buddhism to Japan in the 6th century. Long before official contact between the two countries, the people of Nepal and Japan established link and friendships a century ago. So I will like to discuss some cultural linkages between Nepal and Japan. Nepal is the birthplace of Lord Gautam Buddha. It has brought the Japanese to this country for pilgrimage as well as in search of Buddhist scriptures long before the establishment of formal relations between these two countries. And the common feature that brought them more closer were the mountain, monastery, and the monarchy as well, that each respected and learned to live in harmony with them. So the love and the another love of affection was that love for the mountain of the Japanese people brought them closest to Nepal and helped in initiating new areas of cooperation between the two countries. Large number of mountain lovers from Japan have visited Nepal since the ascent of Mount Manaslu in 1956 by Japanese expedition. So many Japanese mountaineers have climbed the high peaks of the Himalayas, including the Mount Everest. Ms. Junko Tabei, a member of the Japanese Women's Everest expedition team, successfully scaled the summit of Mount Everest on May 16, 1925. She was the first woman in the world to climb the Mount Everest, and her performance was enthusiastically praised by people all over the world. So let's move to the economic relation. Japan has been contributing to the socio-economic development of Nepal since 1954. Japan has assisted Nepal in the forms of bilateral grants, bilateral loans, multilateral aid, and technical assistance. The major area of Japanese economic cooperation with Nepal include human resource development, health, agriculture development, infrastructure development, environment protection, cultural, etc. Japan also provides concessional loans for infrastructure development in Nepal. For example, Tonhu Hydropower, Nagdunga Tunnel, and improvement of water supply improvement projects are ongoing projects under this scheme. Let's before talking about the trade relation, I will focus on like economic liberalization in Nepal. So Nepal opened up its economy in the early 1990s with the adoption of the economic reform package, and there was subsequently financial reform were also carried out to support the trade and industrial reform. And Nepal accessions with the WTO in 2004 has given more space for the trade and investment in Nepal, and also the Comprehensive Economic Reform Program of 2002. So Nepal trade investment. Japan is one of the important trading partner of Nepal. Nepal major exports to Japan include pashmina products, ready-made garments, woolen goods, carpets, handicrafts, Nepali paper and paper products, leather goods, and silverware and ornaments to Japan. Like Nepal as an underdeveloped country, it does not have many industrial products to export to Nepal. So it might be one of the reasons that Nepal has trade imbalances with almost every country. We face the trade deficit. Likewise, also let's say that what are the likewise Nepal major imports from Japan include vehicles, spare parts, electronic goods, machinery and equipment, iron, steel products, and photographic goods, medical equipment, and fabric, etc. So Japan is also one of the major source of FDI in Nepal, but in recent, the FDI has remained stable. It has not increased much. So let's see the trade data of the between Nepal and Japan. So when we see this graph, that Nepal has imported more goods than it has exported. So it seems that there is a huge trade deficit between Nepal and Japan. Nepal facing trade deficit. So, and the next is like the stock of FDI from Japan and Nepal. So in terms of paid up capital, reserves, loans, and share of total FDI inflow in Nepal, it is still a low amount. India being the first, India and China are now in the top position. Let's see the in terms of the sector wise. Now, if we see that service sector has more FDI than the other sectors, industry is somehow almost half of the service sector over the years in various infrastructure and livelihood development projects. And Japan International Cooperation Agency JICA has been providing three types of support like grant, ODA loan, and technical cooperation. It also it is same with the Nepal. Likewise, JICA is providing this assistance to many other developing countries. And for the last few decades, the cooperation has been more focused on grant aid and technical cooperation. And JICA gives around $2 billion annually to Nepal for the development projects. So some of the major projects that is carried out in Nepal are like project for the improvement of transportation capacity, which is grant aid, and modernization of Tribhuvan International Airport, improvement of intersection in Kathmandu, construction of Sinduli roads, and countermeasures construction for landslides on Sinduli roads, and operation and maintenance of Sinduli road, improvement of community access, and improvement of Kathmandu-Bhakpur road of 9.1 kilometer, and a study on Kathmandu Valley urban transportation. Some of the major focuses like developing transport infrastructure, the 4-lane Kathmandu-Bhakpur road, which is 9.1 kilometer, and the Sindri road 160 kilometer, have been help in easing traffic congestion in the valley and the linkage to the capital city with the eastern region respectively. And it has also it contributed in power generation and transmission capacity improvement. And it has give assistance to the urban environment improvement. Japan's grant aid contributed to the construction of 15 water treatment plants in the country. In terms of treatment capacity, they make up about 52% of the capacity within the Kathmandu Valley. And it has also helped in the development of the private sector. So there are still some problems in terms of economy, like Nepal is facing huge trade imbalances, and it has inadequate market. If we compare, we do not have much industrial production which can be exported to Japan. Mostly machinery and electronic goods, industrial products we are importing, and it might be due to the lack of infrastructure in Nepal and the long political instability in Nepal, which has hindered the development of Nepal. So what
Mr.
could be the
Sunil, can I please request you to quickly
Yeah.
conclude?
This is my last slide. Yeah, and then there is some prospect, like we have already discussed that one of the major areas is hydropower, that Japan is also contributed in the development of the hydroelectricity, and it can be there can be cooperation between tourism industry. Japan is already providing some scholarships to government officials and training to study in Japan, and there is could be the area of cooperation between these two countries for the mineral exploration, information and communication technology, and there is still a huge scope for FDI from Japan to Nepal, and it can be possible only when the investment environment in Nepal will be improved. So it is essential to enhance bilateral relations for the development of Nepal. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So there are a couple of questions in the chat, and I think the first one is for Professor Khadga. Somebody has asked, Upendra Manshrishta has asked, how do the Japanese perceive Nepal?
Mr. Chair, well, I was in Japan from 2002 to 2009 initially for master's, PhD and postdoc, and later I was again at Kyoto University for 1 year as Japan Foundation Fellow. Whenever we work together with any Bangladeshi and other Afghan, Iranian friends in Japan, some rural people asked, where are you from? So when we say Bangladesh, they used to use the word Achui Desme, meaning that seems like you are very hot. You are very hot weather. And meanwhile, I used to say I'm from Nepal. They used to pronounce Nepal as a Nepal. They used to say that Kirei Desne, your country is very beautiful. So this is always feel proud. Even I encountered one of my Afghani friend. He's not a Kabul University engineering professor. He's a very nice guy, but he has a beard. And it was after 9/11, 2002 around. And because of accompanying with the Afghan friend, the first time I was asked by a civil dress police. So he asked me, where are you from? When I said Nepal, he left me Can you understand? You're a beautiful country, you're from beautiful country. So that he was asking Afghan friend so many questions. So why I'm sharing this my experiences in Japan, because of Japanese attitude to traditionally, for me, I'm always proud of being a Nepali in Japan. Even while I was a graduate student in Japan, I could construct 4 elementary to high school in my home district with the help of Japanese during my weekend. I used to speak about Nepal, and then there was a kind of like support from different organizations to construct school back in my home district. So that Japanese perception to Nepal was beautiful Himalayan country where Buddha was born. So they don't have any negative perception towards Nepal. Only thing is that in data we are still poor and backward. However, in South Asia, we are the virgin country for Japanese scholars. There are hundreds of Japanese anthropologists who study Nepal. So that is a window for rest of all the South Asia. Of course, trade and transit economic transaction with India is the largest of Japan. But Pakistan, Bangladesh and Nepal, after 1990, international relations are largely determined by market, open market economy. Because of market, Bangladesh and Pakistan were larger market than Nepal. However, culturally, topographically, our soft power, mountain and Buddha, and their images to Nepal is beautiful country. This is the perception.
Thank you so much, Professor. One last question to Dr. Bhattaraj. Dr. Madan Bhattaraj, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, the question to you is, what do you think could be Nepal's initiatives to improve Japan-Nepal relations and to boost this certain lack of initiatives for project implementations or insights that you have earlier shared in your presentation? What could be the next steps for Nepal?
Thank you. Let me first of all thank you, madam, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. Second, I would like to extend my thanks to Professor Khadga and Mr. Sunil Chowdhury, because they have gone with facts and figures. I talked with other sidelights, and then as Professor Kesi has already said, he spent 7.5 years there, he studied there, he's an academic, he's a scholar, and he also speaks Nihon language. So you see, so he had a very good presentation. So far as the main question is concerned, there are 2 aspects, madam. The first is that it is for us to stick to the project schedule, because actually if the project is to be completed within 5 years or 3 years or 4 years, this is for us, not for the Japanese to do that. So we have been lacking that. That is one part. The second part is that why I am saying that the Japanese have reservation to us is that Udaipur cement factory, take one example, was one of the model project of Nepal-Japan cooperation, because that was one of the biggest factories that the Japanese helped established. Now the status of the factory is very bad, And then there are so many things. Even you can take the status of teaching hospital. Tribhuvan Teaching Hospital, taken as one of the best hospitals in the country, is not doing that good, So because actually that always makes some disincentive on the part of the countries who donate us, who just provide projects for us. And the other thing I am just trying to tell is that there are plethora of visits, as I told you, you see, because actually, take the example of a tunnel. Because actually there is nothing for an ambassador like me to go and see the tunnel in Japan, because I don't understand it. I don't understand the language. Scores of ministers are visiting every month, every second month, third month, with the big delegations, including engineers. Engineers may understand it, but the same engineer is going round and round, and then you see the project was delayed. So we have to improve on that. You see, unless we improve that, we cannot expect more cooperation, more investment. The other thing is that we have to change the modality of projects also, because actually time has come that we should focus on agriculture. You see, there was a time when agriculture was taken as one of the areas, but we don't take it because we are an agriculture, primarily an agriculture country. So we can take cooperation from Japan and that sector. So we should focus on that. And the third thing I tell you is that, you see, we should always go for project-based approach. Because unless we go for project-based approach, sometimes it may not be feasible to just undertake the project in time. So these are some of the suggestions I make, but the thing normally goes to the finance ministry, because finance ministry is the nodal ministry as far as the implementation projects in Nepal is concerned, because they head the foreign division. Thank you, madam. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to share for it, or any other things, because as I told you, my knowledge of Japan is quite limited. I spent there 4 years as ambassador. I had never been there. So I tried my best to learn the country, but I always feel that there are many shortcomings, madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that insightful comment. I would like to thank all the esteemed panelists as well as our audience for this presence, and thanks to NICE Nepal for organizing this panel. I hand it over to the host of the session,